The stage was called Stage 7, and it sat in the northeast corner of the Golden Harvest Lot in Kowloon, Hong Kong. The year was 1972. The month was March. The hour was just before 10 in the morning, when the air inside a working film studio carries the particular smell of fresh lumber, dried plaster, and fluorescent heat that has not yet had time to cook off. There were 41 people on that stage: crew, extras, a dialect coach, 2 producers from the Hong Kong side, and a handful of stunt performers who had arrived before 6 and who had been sitting on apple crates near the secondary camera for 4 hours, waiting. They were professionals. Waiting was the work. Standing near the craft table against the north wall was a woman named Carol Riker. She was 31 years old. She stood 5 feet 7 inches in flat shoes. She weighed 138 pounds, and she had the posture of someone who had learned, a long time ago, that a room rarely notices what it has not been told to notice. Nobody on that stage knew what she had done before she arrived in Hong Kong. Nobody knew about the 32 months she had served as a combat-trained women Marine with the United States Marine Corps. Nobody knew about the hand-to-hand combat instruction she had received at Quantico, Virginia under a staff sergeant who had 2 tours in Korea behind him and very little patience for half measures. Nobody knew that she had placed second in a regional Shotokan tournament held outside San Diego in the autumn of 1964. Second, not because her technique was inferior, but because the judging in mixed division events that year had certain preferences that were not advertised in the program. Carol Riker had come to Hong Kong as a stunt performer. She had listed her qualifications on a single typed page and sent them to the production office through an American contact. She had not elaborated. The production office had seen her listed credits and her physical assessment scores, and they had hired her for 3 days of background stunt work on a film that was already 2 weeks behind schedule and in no position to be selective. She had been on the lot for 2 days. She had not been introduced to the lead. In 6 seconds, she would punch Bruce Lee in the face. In 5 seconds after that, with 41 witnesses frozen in place around her, she would stand in the specific silence of a working film set when the floor of what is happening drops away entirely and nobody on it knows what to say. What happened in those 11 seconds, and what was spoken quietly in the moments that followed, would be told in dojos across 3 continents for the next 50 years. It would gain details it did not have. It would shed details it did. But the core of it, the thing that happened and the thing that was said, would remain intact. Because 4 people who were present that morning each told a version of it independently, in different decades, in different countries, and on 4 separate occasions the versions lined up. If you want to hear what Bruce Lee said to her from the floor, and you do want to hear it, stay with this until the end. Begin with what Carol Riker was, because the story does not hold without it. She had enlisted at 19 in 1960 before the Women Armed Services Integration Act had fully settled into the institutional culture of any branch. She had been assigned to administrative support, as the majority of women Marines were. She had requested reassignment to the Physical Training Division within her first 8 months, citing her background in competitive Shotokan karate, which she had been studying since the age of 14 under a Japanese-American instructor in Gardena, California, who ran his dojo out of a converted 2-car garage and who charged $3 a month and who had trained at various points 3 men who went on to compete at the national level. The request had been reviewed. It had been partially granted. She had been permitted to assist with conditioning instruction for female recruits, and she had, over the following 14 months, quietly inserted herself into the hand-to-hand training rotations in ways that the administrative record did not fully document, but that the staff sergeant at Quantico later confirmed in a letter written in 1991 for a veterans oral history project. He wrote that she was the most technically precise student he had encountered in 11 years of instruction, and that the precision was not natural talent, it was repetition. It was 10,000 repetitions of the same defensive entry, the same closing measure, the same redirection, until the movement lived below conscious thought. She left the Corps in 1962 with an honorable discharge and a folder of commendations that she kept in a shoebox under her bed and did not discuss. She returned to Los Angeles and continued to train. She took a job doing stunt coordination work on the margins of the television industry where the pay was irregular and the work required a precise understanding of how a body falls, how a strike sells to a camera at 45 degrees, and how to make contact at full theatrical commitment without crossing the inch that separates performance from injury. She was good at that inch. She understood it the way a surgeon understands the difference between the blade entering and the blade arriving where it needs to go. The understanding was technical. It was also moral. You do not cross that inch because crossing it is a failure of the craft, and a failure of the craft means the person across from you pays for your error with their body. She had not crossed that inch in 11 years of professional stunt work. On the morning of March the 14th, 1972, at 18 minutes past 9 on Stage 7 of the Golden Harvest lot in Kowloon, she crossed it. The sequence that was being rehearsed that morning was a crowd scene altercation. The production had 12 extras arranged in a loose configuration near the center of the stage. The stunt performers, including Carol Riker, were positioned at the edge of the configuration, waiting for the assistant director to call action on what would be the fourth run-through of the morning. The purpose of the run-through was to establish sight lines for the camera operator and to allow the assistant choreographer to count the beats of the movement sequence. The movement sequence was 19 beats long. Carol Riker's role was beats 11 through 14, a turning grab and release that cleared a path for the principal. She knew the sequence. She had run it twice the previous afternoon and 3 times that morning. She had the timing inside her body the way timing lives when the repetition has been sufficient, not as thought, but as breath. What she did not have, what nobody had told her and what the assistant director would later acknowledge was an oversight in the communication chain, was the information that the principal would be entering the configuration from a different angle on this run-through. The angle had been changed at 8:40 that morning during a lighting adjustment discussion between the director and the cinematographer. The change had been communicated to the lead camera operator and to the first assistant director. It had not reached the stunt performers at the edge of the configuration. At 19 minutes past 9, the assistant director called action. Carol Riker began her count. She was on beat 10 when a figure entered her left peripheral field from an angle she had not been told to expect, moving at a speed that told her the sequence had been altered in a way she did not yet understand. She had 11 years of training and 32 months of institutional discipline and the particular neural architecture of a person who has drilled a defensive response so thoroughly that it does not ask permission before it arrives. She did not think. She turned. She drove a right-handed lead side punch from the hip, compact and fast and fully committed, in the direction of the incoming figure. The figure was Bruce Lee. He was 5 feet 7.5 inches tall. He weighed 132 pounds. He was 21 days from his 32nd birthday. He had been moving at what the stunt coordinator would later describe as roughly 60% of his working speed, which was still considerably faster than the movement of most people at full effort. He saw the punch arrive. He did not fully slip it. The impact was partial. The knuckles of her right hand caught the left side of his jaw, at the point where the jaw angles toward the ear with enough transferred force that his head moved. His footing held. His hands came up in an immediate reflexive guard. His eyes focused. He was on the floor in the next half second, not from the impact but because his footing, which had held, slipped on the edge of a cable cover that ran along the floor of the stage at that position, and he sat down hard, and then he was still. 41 people on Stage 7 stopped moving. The assistant director, whose name was Edmund Falk, and who had been in the industry for 9 years, said afterward that in 9 years he had never heard a stage go that quiet that fast. He described it as a quality of silence you do not encounter on a working set. He said he set down the clipboard he was holding. He said he set it down as if it were very heavy, or as if he were not entirely certain he should be holding it in the first place. The second camera operator, a man named Davies who had come over from a British production company and who was standing 8 feet from the point of impact, said that he became aware, in the moment after, that he had not drawn a breath. He was not certain how long it had been since he had drawn one. He stood very still, and he did not draw one yet. The dialect coach, a woman in her 50s who was seated in a canvas chair 12 feet away and who had seen a great many things on a great many sets across a career that had begun in the Shaw Brothers era, looked at the floor. She did not look at Bruce Lee. She looked at the floor where he had been standing, as if she expected to find some evidence there of what had just occurred. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, do it now, because what happened next, what Bruce Lee said, and what it meant for the woman standing above him, and what the 4 witnesses who told this story separately across 5 decades all agreed was the strangest and most important moment of that morning, you will not want to miss it. Subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Carol Riker did not move for 2 full seconds. She stood at a distance of 14 inches from the place where Bruce Lee had come to rest. Her right hand was still partially closed. She had not straightened from the follow-through of the punch. She was looking at him. Her face, according to Edmund Folk, who was watching her as much as he was watching the man on the floor, carried an expression he struggled to characterize in the oral history interview he gave in 2004. He said it was not panic. He said it was not blankness. He said it was the expression of a person who has made a calculation in the last 2 seconds that has produced a result they did not expect, and who is now verifying the result against the evidence available to them. She straightened. She took her right hand and pressed it flat against her thigh, which was a habit she had carried from the Marine Corps, where you learned that a closed fist in the aftermath of an incident was a communication you did not intend to make. She looked at Bruce Lee. He was sitting on the stage floor with his hands on the ground to either side of him, the way a person sits when they have landed and are taking inventory of what the landing has done. He was not unconscious. He was not bleeding. His eyes were open and they were on her. She said, in English, clearly and without volume, in the specific flat register of a person delivering information rather than performing an emotion, "I am sorry. That was my fault. I did not know you were coming from that side." She said it in 5 words more and then she stopped. Bruce Lee looked at her for a moment that several witnesses later described, independently and using different language, as being longer than it appeared to be in clock time. Then he said something. He said it quietly, so that only she and the 2 people closest to them heard it. What he said will be returned to. First, there is the matter of what happened in between. He stood up without assistance. He did not accept the hand that the stunt coordinator extended toward him. He stood using his own balance and his own sequence, which was deliberate and unhurried, and he stood in a way that communicated to the people watching that the inventory he had taken in the last 4 seconds had returned a satisfactory result. He looked at Carol Riker. A fight is not a punch thrown and a person falling. A fight is a conversation conducted in the language of distance, weight, and timing, and even when the conversation lasts less than 1 second, it contains information. Bruce Lee had received information in the last 4 seconds that he was now processing. The information was technical. The speed of the punch was the first variable. The economy of the motion was the second. The angle of the entry was the third. These 3 variables, taken together, told him something about the person who had thrown it that the 2 days she had been on the lot had not told him. He had not known she was a Marine. He had not known about Quantico. He had not known about the tournament in San Diego. He had not known about 11 years of stunt work in an industry where the inch between performance and injury was the entire discipline. He knew some of it now. He looked at her for 3 more seconds without speaking. He looked at her the way a person looks at a document they have been told describes one thing and which, on inspection, describes something quite different. Then he made a decision. He turned to Edmund Folk and he said in Cantonese to reset the configuration. He said it without drama. He said it the way a person says a thing that has been decided and requires no further discussion. Edmund Folk reset the configuration. Bruce Lee turned back to Carol Riker and he said, in English, in a voice that was low enough that the people at the edges of the stage did not catch it, but that the 5 people within 10 feet of them heard clearly, "Where did you train?" It was not a question the way a question is typically asked. It did not rise at the end. It was a question the way a measurement is a question, a request for a specific piece of data that will be applied to a specific calculation. She told him. She told him about Gardena. She told him about the garage dojo and the $3 monthly tuition and the instructor who had trained 3 national-level competitors. She told him about Quantico and the staff sergeant with 2 tours behind him. She told him about San Diego and the second-place finish. He listened without speaking. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said the thing that the 4 witnesses who were close enough to hear all confirmed, across 4 separate tellings in different decades in different countries. He said, the punch was clean. The situation was wrong. Those are 2 different problems. He paused. He said, come back after lunch. She came back after lunch. What happened in the 2 hours that followed was not filmed, because there was no camera operating on stage 7 during the lunch break, and because neither of them requested one. What is known comes from 3 sources: a letter that Carol Riker wrote to her former instructor in Gardena in the summer of 1972, which his estate made available to researchers in 2008, a passage in a production memoir written by Edmund Folk in 1994, which covers the afternoon in 4 sentences, and an interview that one of the stunt performers gave to a martial arts magazine in 1979, which is partial and second-hand but consistent with the other accounts. What the sources agree on is this: Bruce Lee worked with her for 112 minutes. He did not instruct her. He did not correct her. He moved with her, that is the language Carol Riker used in the letter to her instructor, and in moving with her he showed her, without naming it, the specific difference between a punch that is thrown at a target and a punch that is thrown toward a conversation. She had 11 years of the first kind. What he was demonstrating, at quarter speed, with a patience that Edmund Folk described as the patience of a person who is genuinely curious rather than professionally obligated, was the second kind. She understood it. She understood it the way a person understands a thing that has always been present in the structure of what they know, but that they have not yet had a name for. The letter to her instructor in Gardena says, "It was not that I did not know how to do it. It was that I had not known there was a word for what I was already doing, and he gave me the word." At 4:17 in the afternoon, they stopped. He said something to her as she was picking up her bag. She wrote it in the letter. It is 7 words. He said, "You apologized for the wrong thing this morning." She asked him what she meant. He said, "You apologized for the punch. You should have apologized for the surprise. The punch was not the problem." She stood at the fork that every person stands at in the moment after they receive a correction that is accurate and that costs something to accept. She could have said that the punch and the surprise were the same event. She could have said that the angle change had not been communicated to her and that the fault in the communication chain was not hers. Both of these things were true. She said neither of them. She said, "You are right." She picked up her bag. She walked out of stage 7 and into the March afternoon of a Kowloon studio lot, where the light was falling flat and yellow on the concrete between the sound stages, and a forklift was moving a pallet of lumber from one side of the lot to the other with complete indifference to what had just happened inside. The story left stage 7 the way these stories always leave the place where they happen, slowly, carried in pieces, by people who were present and who each carried the piece they had seen. Edmund Folk told it first at a dinner with 4 colleagues in the summer of 1973, where it was received with the interested skepticism that professional people apply to stories about their industry that they did not witness. He told it again in his memoir in 1994, in the 4 careful sentences that did not editorialize but that placed the facts in sequence and let the sequence carry the weight. The stunt performer who had been 8 feet away told his version to the Martial Arts magazine in 1979. His version had more detail in the wrong places, he described the sound of the impact incorrectly, and he placed Edmund Folk closer to the action than Folk's own account locates him, but the architecture of the story was intact. The dialect coach, who had looked at the floor and had not looked at Bruce Lee, told her version to a documentary crew in the early 90s. She said she had not seen the punch land, but she had seen the aftermath. She said the aftermath told her everything she needed to know about the character of both people involved, and she was not specific about which character she meant. Because she meant both. The letter to the instructor in Gardena did not become available until 2008, when the estate released it as part of a small archive of correspondence. When researchers placed it alongside the Falk memoir and the magazine interview, what struck them was not the differences, which were numerous and minor, but the agreements, which were few and absolute. Every account agreed on the thing Bruce Lee said from the floor, which was quiet enough that only the people within 10 feet heard it. Every account agreed on what Carol Riker said in response, and every account agreed on the thing he said at 4:17 in the afternoon, about the punch and the surprise being different problems. The story spread the way accurate stories spread, not quickly and not completely, but with a durability that the inaccurate versions, which were more dramatic and which circulated faster, did not have. By the time the martial arts community of the 1980s had produced its full library of legends about Bruce Lee, the story of Carol Riker had settled into a particular place in that library. Not the loudest story, not the most repeated one, but one of the few that every person who had worked on the Golden Harvest lot in that era would confirm when asked, without elaboration and without embellishment, because it did not require either. Carol Riker left the film industry in 1979. She went back to Gardena, California, where the garage dojo she had trained in as a child was still operating under a different instructor. The original instructor had retired in 1971. She trained there for 2 years and then she began instructing herself in a school she ran out of a rented space in a strip mall on a commercial street that has since been redeveloped and no longer exists. She instructed for 17 years. She retired in 1996. In the autumn of 2003, a researcher working on an oral history project related to women in the martial arts community contacted her by letter. She agreed to be interviewed. The interview ran to 4 sessions. In the 3rd session, the researcher asked her about March the 14th, 1972. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said that the thing she remembered most clearly was not the punch and not the afternoon and not the 7 words he had said at 4:17. She said the thing she remembered most clearly was the 2 hours in between, the way he had moved with her at quarter speed, without instructing, without correcting, only moving, and the way she had understood inside those movements. Something about her own practice that she had not been able to name before that afternoon. She said, "He did not teach me anything I did not already know. He showed me that I knew it. Those are 2 different things." She paused. She said, "That is what I apologized for, eventually, not the punch, not the morning. For the 31 years I spent not knowing that I knew it." What lives at the center of this story is not the punch, though the punch is the reason anyone tells it. What lives at the center of it is the decision that Carol Riker made when she stood at the fork. The punch had already happened. The situation had already resolved. The correction had been delivered and received. The only thing remaining was the choice, to defend the thing that was defensible or to accept the thing that was accurate. She chose the accurate thing. That choice did not come from weakness. It came from 32 months at Quantico and 11 years of professional discipline and a particular understanding of the inch between performance and injury that she had been refining since she was 14 years old in a garage dojo in Gardena, California. It came from the same training that had thrown the punch in the first place. Technique tells you what to do with your body. Character tells you what to do with the moment after. The 2 are not the same instruction. But in the people who have truly mastered either one, they tend to produce the same result. Next week, we will talk about the afternoon in 1964 when Chuck Norris walked into a tournament in Los Angeles where nobody knew his name, and a reigning national champion told a room full of witnesses exactly what was going to happen to him. He was wrong about 1 word in that sentence, only 1, but that word was the whole story.